Hello, friends. Welcome to the Note Coach podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Kohlberg, joined today by DanaKaren. I didn't ask your surname. This happens every time. The listener's going to be like, oh my goodness, is it Ciccone?
Ciccone.
Ciccone. I was nowhere near. I was nowhere near.
You and everybody else. Don't worry about it.
Oh, how often has anyone ever got it?
I think I've had maybe a tenth of people get it correctly the first time around. Usually it's because they maybe know that Madonna's last name is Ciccone or they have some
Really?
Italian
So you've got the
in
same
their
last name as
family.
Madonna. Oh my
Yes,
goodness.
yes. If you're out there, cousin, I'm waiting to be I'm waiting to be found.
Here's my number. I never knew that. I'm never going to forget that now. And I'm always going to have your name right. And I'm sure so are the listeners. But my surname's Kohlberg, which I don't think is that hard. But I get everything from Goldberg to like you don't even know. So
Really? There
yeah,
you go.
surname pronunciation. But yeah, you think I would have learned. How many episodes have I done now? 400 and something. I always check the first name. Surname is just like, we'll wing it. And it's something you most definitely should not wing. Anyway, DanaKaren, we're talking today about people pleasing and chronic pain. But before we dive in, I've had a number of people on the show talk about people pleasing. It's something that I work with. But what I find is so many of my listeners don't identify with that term. If I said to them, are you people
Mm.
pleaser? Oh, no. I'm just a really good friend. I'm just really generous. But what they do identify with is a discomfort in saying no or letting people down or
Yes.
wanting people to like them. So before we get into the pain stuff, I'd love to know your definition of people pleasing and the response people have had that you've worked with that term.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think also it's been sort of kind of connected to like being a doormat or something, and or being submissive. And so you could be sort of like internally feeling very assertive or feeling very strong or confident or wanting to project that. But and so maybe the people pleasing term doesn't kind of resonate. But I think again, being like you said, someone who has a hard time saying no, someone who kind of allows their value to be wrapped up in external validation. So you're kind of not taking internal cues for your direction, but really taking a lot of your cues externally for directing your decision making, how you perceive yourself, your sense of self.
I love that. I love that. Let's spend a few moments there because how often, I know you're an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur, many of my listeners are, but not always. But whether it's a business idea or a personal idea, you have an idea of something. I'm going to write a book. I say that because I see your book behind you, shameless plug for anyone watching on YouTube. Or I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to finally learn to play the piano. Like I might be 40 now,
Mm,
but I've always wanted, whatever the thing is, and you're internally kind of excited, and then you share it with a loved one, partner, family member, friend, and they like destroy, not maliciously, but they're like, say you're like, I want to take up ballet, and they're like, really, at your age or at your
right.
size, or how are you going to pay
Won't
for
you hurt
that, or
yourself or yeah.
yes. So I love how you define people pleasing as like, I can't remember your exact wording. I have to listen to that back because it was gold. But taking your cues externally from others, because also too, what we never acknowledge is other people have, whether they're conscious of it or not, their own personal agenda. Like if I said to my husband, "Hey, I want to take up ballet," not only is there the cost, because I'm sure it's not a cheap sport, like the lessons, the shoes, the outfits, whatever, then also potentially the public humiliation that he might experience with secondhand embarrassment that his not so slim, not so coordinated wife decides to. I'm rewatching currently Desperate Housewives. Did you ever watch that?
No, to be honest with you.
No, that's all good. So if anyone
Actually, that's not
listening,
true. I think I saw like some of season one, but I was not like a avid watcher.
oh, for whatever reason, I'm rewatching it. I don't know. But anyway, one of the characters, her name's Susan, she's going through a jewelry making phase. Her jewelry is awful. Like there's just no two ways about it. And she's like, I need to make some extra money. I'm going to sell my jewelry. And you can see all her friends look at each other. In this case, though, they're actually being supportive. They're not, no one's actually stepping in and saying, perhaps not. But anyway, it's just kind of like, so going to buy all the materials, spending all the time. And it's like, so sometimes people have their own issues, insecurities, thoughts, or whatever that they project onto us. And then that can stop us from actually going after the thing that we want.
And sometimes it's not even that direct, right? Sometimes it's like it's not even explicit cues you take from other people. It's like implied cues you take from other people. It's so I think of it a lot as sort of a state of being, and it's a thing I obviously relate to, which is why I care about it, right? We talk about and we care about the things that that we feel ourselves, but this sense of being almost outside of your body because you're so busy being in the environment, trying to sense like how you're being perceived by other people that you're like not actually with your internal reality. And that is kind of how we start to get into how that manifests in pain.
Yes.
Because I
So
think the
take
more
us
that you
there.
live in a way that's like separated, it makes it harder to be attached to your internal physical state.
Because I think, and I'm interested to hear your take or your thoughts. For myself personally, I never used to be in touch with my body at all. It's like I'd live my life from the neck up. Like unless I was that sick that I was bedridden, like I would just soldier on. Like we literally have this painkiller company here in Australia called Codral, and they literally have this song, "Soldier on with Codral, soldier on, soldier on," and it's just like we're just encouraged, just keep going, just keep going.
Boy, I thought we had the patent on obnoxious America of ways in America to make you feel like you need to just keep pushing forward.
Oh no, I think it's pretty universal, but it's kind of like just, and we wear it as a badge of honor. Like it's so funny if you're like, I worked a 100-hour week. Oh my gosh, well done. If you're like, I took the day off to go to the movies, you slacker.
Yeah,
I went to
right.
yoga. What? Nice for some. You've got time for that. I did some meditation. Oh, well, it just goes to show you haven't got enough to do, or you don't take pride in
Right.
your work, or I don't know, whatever it is.
I gave that presentation with projectile vomiting.
Well, it's funny you should say that. My daughter is a competitive cheerleader, and they have to go to those trainings no matter what. Now, I do understand, obviously, they have a team and they are coordinating it and stuff, but it is incredible how much they force those kids. And one of my
Mm,
friends in a different team was saying that her daughter literally was vomiting. She had a stomach virus. So off stage, she was vomiting. She got on, did her 3-minute routine, and got off and was vomiting again. And I was like, why are we encouraging that? That is not healthy
right.
in any way, shape, or
No.
form. So
Yeah,
tell
absolutely.
us about the link between people pleasing and chronic pain.
So, in my experience, there's this has actually been replicated in other people's writing and research as well. So I feel confident saying it, but I've seen in my world that people who tend to come to me with chronic pain symptoms, once we do a little bit of digging into their history and so on, you end up discovering that they either, if I ask them like, well, what are you doing movement for? Like, why are you here? And what are your goals and dreams? They sort of have a blank page, right? That sort of that feeling of like, I don't know. Like how do I answer the question of what do you like to do? What makes you feel good? What makes you feel not good? And you can kind of see that people are really not living with a state of kind of awareness of their internal needs and desires and priorities. And so I have to believe that it's coming from a place of external. And so, you may dig into it and it may be like, they're a caregiver for someone, a parent or something, or it may be that they're in a relationship or just even being a parent yourself can be very difficult to be inside your body because you're taking care of other human beings. But if you and that is like a kind of a stage of life and a totally natural thing. But if you like consistently find yourself being someone who waits to hear how other people perceive um you in the world as being good or not good, or a kind of wait on with bated breath on validation from others about your success in life, you're really setting yourself up to be in complete disconnect with your physical reality. It's also going to lead to chronic stress. Chronic stress is a huge contributor to chronic pain. um, but I generally find that people, especially when it comes to things like low back pain, that there's some sort of aspect of their life that they're tending to not pay attention to, and the nervous system is feeling hyper vigilant about it. And the way that it's expressing it is in a painful sensation. And maybe it expressed it in a more subtle way at first, but we have a tendency to be so disconnected we don't hear it or feel it. And so by the time we've noticed that our nervous system is really amped up, it's like in a migraine or it could be something like GI distress or other ways that stress can show up in a kind of dysregulated physical body. And there's just a huge connection. You don't really hear about sociopaths like or people who have like a complete disconnect from other people's feelings, saying, I'm feeling really stressed out about the way that I interacted with that human being today. I mean, it's just there's just not a lot of stress there, right? And so the opposite of that is being a person who literally feels every look, every glance, every tone of voice, every interaction like so deeply that it becomes trigger after trigger after trigger after trigger for your nervous system to be in a state of overly sensitized.
And just you talking about that, it is exhausting. I used to be so sensitive, tonality, messages. Like if somebody normally would write me War and Peace if I sent them a text message and they just wrote back good, I'd be like, "Oh, what have I done?" Or, like my husband's tell is if he ever writes K, like not okay, just K. And kind of like these things happen now. And I still notice them. I won't say that I don't notice them, but I don't feel triggered or activated. I'm like, well, they got something going on. And if they want to talk about it, they can reach out to me. And it's just so much a lighter
Yeah.
way to live. Like if I'm running a group call and somebody leaves early, I'm like, oh, maybe one of their kids got sick, maybe something happened in the background. They can watch the replay, they can reach out if they've got questions, because that constant it's like hypervigilance. That's how I interpret what you were talking about, where you're so attuned to everybody else's tonality, voice, phrases, whatever,
Hmm.
that, as you said, you're not connected at all to what's happening in here. Because if I'm forever following up when someone says good instead of their big thing, my husband says K instead of okay, somebody leaves a call early. What's going on in here? I've got no idea. No idea.
Hmm.
And then next thing you know, I've thrown my back and can't get out of bed for a week, or, I get a cold. And not saying like you can literally hurt yourself. You can literally get sick. We're not saying that that doesn't ever
Sure.
happen. But sometimes these things show up because you're ignoring, as you said, all the little signs. And just this year, I turned 40. We went on a cruise overseas for my birthday. It was fabulous. And it was 2 weeks. And I thought when I got back, I'd feel so refreshed. I'd feel all this sort of stuff. When I got, oh, I'm not a drinker or anything or a partier, but like when I got back, I was actually quite tired. And then I looked at
Yeah.
my schedule and I was like, I'm going to have to cut down like some of these things. I'm going to have to drop back. Past me would have been like, you've had your 2 weeks, your holiday's done. Back to your soldier on, And I was like,
Hmm.
but how I'm feeling is not
Mm.
refreshed. And it's amazing sometimes too. Like I think, my husband still does a 9 to 5 and he has his 4 weeks well, we get 4 weeks here in Australia. I think you guys only get two in the US, 2 or 3, like
It
annual
depends on the
leave.
place, but yeah,
That
three
blows
would
my
be
mind. But when you think about it, you work, 50 weeks, 48 weeks of the year. You take the 2 weeks off that's supposed to be your rest, but then you cram everything in that you don't do during the year. No wonder you're tired. There's
right.
that.
Like your doctor's appointments. Yeah.
But also too, it's like there's what you think and then there's what you feel. So the a big like turning point for me, it was the dumbest conversation, but it really highlighted to me. So I live in Sydney, which people tend to know, Harbour Bridge. My family's from Tasmania, the tiny little island down the bottom that often gets left off the map. And I was talking to my dad one day and he said something like mundane, like, how's the weather? And I was like, it's cold. And he's like, oh, well, what's the temperature? I'm like, I don't know, cold. you know? And he's like really insistent, like, what temperature is it? And it was such a bizarre conversation. So I'm like trying to find the weather app on my phone while I'm talking to him. I'm like, oh, it's, 9 degrees or something. He's like, oh, well, you're allowed to be cold then. And I was like, excuse me? I'm allowed to be cold. Like I'm feeling cold, so I'm wearing a jumper or my hoodie or whatever it was. And it's like,
Right.
or if you've just eaten, sometimes it's like, oh, I've just had lunch. I'm not allowed to be hungry. It's like, but my body right now, today, wants more food than it did yesterday. Like what satisfied me yesterday, and I've got a whole dieting history and problems. But it's like when you actually tune into your body, sometimes that amount of sleep is fine and you're great. Sometimes you need less and you wake up and you're on fire. But so often we're like, I've scheduled myself to the umpteenth degree and I've done my allocation. Whatever my body says, I'm just gonna keep going.
So I think the challenge is that, like, and I want to be clear too, because there is a benefit to being a person with empathy, right? Like it's good to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. I wouldn't be able to do my job working with people with chronic pain. Like I wouldn't, if I couldn't have compassion and be able to meet people where they are. That I wouldn't be able to do that. Coaches couldn't do their work if they couldn't do that to some degree. What I think is important is figuring out how to separate those qualities and those aspects of being a people pleaser or being sort of tuned into your environment from the ones that actually become cumulative and damaging to our nervous system and our quality of life. And so I think what doesn't happen when you're constantly being tuned into, first of all, we take on often the emotions of the people that we're hearing. So we're not only obsessed about why did my husband only say K, but like if the person's in the room with you, you're feeling the like bristling, or you like, you're like you're almost mirroring them, right? Like, but then you're kind of, okay, now I'm obsessed with turning the corner on this. Now I'm obsessed with like, how do I get this person to be nice or like me, or be confident or affectionate or whatever again. And again, like you said, it may have nothing to do with you. Like I'll be like, oh, I've decided that the lady in the grocery store hates me. So I need to figure out how to say nice to her like 400 ways, say hello so that she's like doesn't glare at me when I come to the cash register. But it turns out it probably has nothing to do with me.
She might just
But
have a
what we're
resting bitch face. Like I
she
have one of
yeah, I mean, she
those.
probably has a hard job. Like, yeah, I mean, she's doing her work and she's like, I'm the last thing on her mind. But the thing is, we're not taking the moment to ask the question, why is this bothering me? Like, what is this triggering
Oh,
in me? Right?
yes.
Is it triggering insecurity? Is it triggering anger? Like, I think oftentimes, especially as women, we also don't know how to place anger because it feels like such an inappropriate emotion, right? Because we don't want to be hysterical or whatever. God forbid. And so I think we also like, I know I have had really a hard time coming to terms with like what anger feels like in my body, and like how do I then release that anger. Um, Instead of letting it sort of boil up inside me too. It's like we have to also think about, if I'm so tied up in this person's response and that person's response is bothering me, what is the actual emotion it's conjuring up for me, and how do I sit with it and process it and like healthily let it go so that it doesn't accumulate into, the grime that becomes a chronic pain or a stress situation.
Well, I love this because, I've heard the saying before, emotions, energy in motion. Or if they're not
Mm.
energy in motion, then they're stagnant, stuck energy. And that can, potentially show up as a physical symptom. And especially something like anger, which is very outward. And if you're like, oh, I can't speak up, or I can't say this, and you swallow. So I believe that was a lot of my overeating, literally swallowing my emotions that I couldn't express.
100%. I've been there.
And,
Yep.
next time, whenever I find myself, knee deep in Tim Tams or elbow deep in a tub of ice cream, because it still happens. Now I don't beat myself up or jump to the next diet or whatever. I'm like, what's going on? What have you not said? What's
Exactly.
bothering you that you haven't acknowledged? Because we're not, as you said, we're not often in tune with our body. I'm a lot more than I used to be, but not always. And sometimes it'll be like, oh, there was that moment or that look or that thing that I didn't acknowledge. And I love how you brought it up. What is it activating in me, or what am I making it mean? It often has very little to do with the other person. And we
Right.
can't
It's
want
some like
something.
core wounds, right?
Yeah. We can't want something more for someone else than they want for themselves. So,
Mhm.
if my husband's having a difficult time at work, so he's writing K or whatever because that, he can't deal with his own stuff. And I'm like, why don't you talk to your boss? And he doesn't want a bar of it. Then he becomes my project. So I externalize everything onto him. I don't need to face all my own stuff where I'm not facing my stuff because I'm suddenly in rescuer mode. And sometimes
Mhm.
people don't even ask for the rescuing, and then tension and then
Mhm.
anger and then this all kind of layers up. Um so yeah, back to this, like when you work with people or chronic pain, do they, my question is, oh, many questions, but do they see the link? Do they come to you for the pain and then you have the discussion and the people pleasing kind of comes up? Or because I think so many times people are like, I've tried everything, and then someone says, as you said, like just asking a few questions can unlock some stuff that perhaps people may not even want to see.
Yeah, so I mean, at at my core, I'm a movement teacher, right? So we're doing movement, and I do think movement is the most powerful tool we have available to us for pain. And so all of the other conversations that happen tangentially, like finding out if a person's a people pleaser or how they're managing stress or um, those things are happening sort of woven into the movement itself. So it may not be an explicit conversation but I'll kind of get some signals of like, okay, this person is really like living inside someone else's life. Like they're kind of showing up inside another person's reality and they're kind of denying their own reality as a result. And that's what's showing up as pain. And like you said, they may have also had an injury, but it could be intensifying a pain that exists, or it could be sort of, multiplying things or causing that hypervigilance. Um, so I think people don't I like to believe people don't know that they're being coached that way, right? That it's kind of just happening. Um, because I'm constantly bringing the conversation back to what's happening in your body, what's happening in your body, what are you feeling right now? Tell me more about that. What is that actually? Like what is that burning pain like really? Tell me more about it. And then we sort of explore where that's coming from and then it's like is there a thought in your mind associated
Mm,
with that feeling? Like what happened today? Is there anything that you're worried about? So, I mean, we kind of get there in a roundabout way, but like ultimately what I'm there for is to help them get stronger, more mobile, more limber. Um, but like we can't really tackle the fear, which is like the fuel of the fire of pain, right? We can't really tackle the fear unless we can get in our bodies and get really connected to what we're here for, what we're trying to do. um, so I think that the people pleasing part kind of comes out. Like, I don't know if any of my clients would ever say, yeah, I'm really glad we tackled that people pleasing thing.
uh,
Um,
sorry, go ahead.
that's it.
I was going to say, I think this is so many great points there. I don't know. I don't think he came on screen. Speaking of my husband, he's obviously not in the K mood today. Just brought me a drink. Love it. Thank you so much.
Ah.
um, the movement and the pain is what I wanted to bring attention to because I have chronic back pain, and it's funny. It's worse when I don't move, and people I think who don't suffer from chronic pain, hopefully they never will, but they kind of don't understand that like moving actually helps, but even in the moment when you initially start, obviously it feels worse. Like if something is sore, well, maybe it's just me, your reaction is to like just keep still, but by keeping still
Yeah.
it actually gets worse. And I have a chronic back injury, and it's funny when it flares, like it really flares up, it's a sign to me like I haven't been moving enough. And
Mhm.
finding movements, and like working with someone like yourself, I think you do Pilates, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
working with a person like one on one to have a personalized routine or personalized um schedule thing, or like because do a lot of things in the water, like literally just walking in the water, because as soon as I get in the
The
water
water is huge.
my back feels great because it doesn't have all the
Mhm.
pressure, literally. But I
Mhm.
think, we tend to have this reaction of like, I'm in pain, just like don't move. But finding the
Mhm.
movements or working with someone as yourself, or like knowing that pain doesn't always mean stop. Like if you're like
Mhm.
bleeding out, like please tourniquet and that kind of thing. We're not talking about that. Oh, you've been bitten by a snake, just run, it's fine. No. But like, because you're talking about chronic pain, um, yeah, like if you want to talk to how you work with people, or actually your own journey. So I know you've had a journey with chronic pain. If you want to share with the listeners what your journey's been, that would probably be really insightful.
Yeah, so I mean, so first of all, movement is valuable for getting our joints and things limbered up, but like also, and I'm not like a woo-woo like energy person, but
That's
I
okay.
do
I
really
am.
believe that I really do believe that because I felt it in my own body and seen it with people, like how you can really move emotions through your body with moving too, right? So I also find it's powerful because when your emotions get stuck, sometimes you can't articulate where they're stuck or why they're stuck, but you can move, and that is a form of release. And so it's good on so many levels. But I did start having low back pain at 13. Um, I do tell my story a bit in the book, because that's really been I mean, that's why this is my purpose in life is to help people kind of hopefully make a shorter journey than I did, which was multiple decades long, to figure out that the answer to my problems was actually in me And I kept searching and seeking, and don't get me wrong, I did have so many people along the way who have contributed to my journey, and without them, I wouldn't be where I am now, which is feeling better in my body in my 40s than I did in my 20s. But it was really because I wasn't listening, and for so many reasons, which is why I also love your mission. Like, having grown up with so much diet culture shoved down my throat as a young dancer, as someone who just was in a larger body, and was constantly being pushed to be in a restrictive kind of eating mentality from a very young age. I think anyone who's been in that mindset before knows the first thing you learn is how to ignore your hunger cues. So if you learn how to ignore one of your body's most primal survival instincts, and no, I mean, no shit, you're gonna not hear anything else your body tells you after that, right? So it's like we get primed for it at a young age. And then I had this big back spasm in the middle of a performance on stage. And then it just became sort of a pattern in my teenage years. And then later in my 20s, I herniated a disc trying to get active again in a different way. And so I don't know, for whatever reason, I am predisposed to some injuries in my back and hips. I don't know if it's anatomical or what. But I have found Pilates and weight training, but also, a wide range of other things, massage therapy, the pool, rest, and not feeling guilty about rest, which is a thing I'm still working on. I really realized at the heart of it that there was an overlap with anxiety that had started from a really young age and that I really hadn't had any knowledge of. I was definitely conditioned to people please everyone around me. I played sort of a peacemaking role in a kind of a tumultuous household. And so all of those things really came to a head together for me. And I have been picking apart every single one of them for the past, 10 or 15 years. And so, like, now I'm able to hear what my body has to say, but it's not fast. And what I just always say to people is like, um, even if you move 5 minutes, if you try to endeavor to move in all directions in some kind of a way that feels good to you, not because some random person on the internet said you have to do this and get a six pack or whatever. Like, do the movements that feel, I call them refuge movements, the sort of comforting, nourishing things that are like your go to, like a warm blanket. You start there, and then you can start to progress into the things that make you feel afraid, because the fear is where the magic is. The fear is where there are things that are hiding, emotions we need to tackle, like difficult challenges, beliefs about yourself and your lack of ability. Like, so many things are sitting in the fear. And that's how we use movement almost as a form of exposure therapy, because a lot of times certain kinds of movements actually cause fear of pain. And so we can really learn a lot about what we believe about our bodies when we start getting there.
That was gold. So many things I want to bring up, but the one that's when you I love how you speak about movement that feels good for you, movement that you enjoy, and even a small amount like 5 minutes. Because often what tends to happen is, we've been talking about how people are conditioned to ignore their body. You're not hungry, you're not this, you're not that. And then say you want to change something about yourself. You want to get fitter, you want to drop weight, you want to whatever it is. What we tend to do is then go somewhere where we're also, once again, encouraged, called to ignore our bodies. Let's go do CrossFit. Let's go do spin. Now, I'm not
Mm.
knocking any of these things. If you love them, you do you. But, if you are incredibly unfit or incredibly overweight or incredibly in a space that this isn't the best movement for you, like the only way I could finish a marathon today is in an ambulance. I'm not joking. But we tend to like go and push ourselves way beyond our comfort zone, our current level of fitness, sometimes with a person yelling at us through a megaphone, let's go to
Ugh.
boot camp. And it's like, we're compounding the issue here. And then further injury, like physical injury on top of potentially emotional injury, and then this whole like shitstorm happens. I remember in 2008, like I had gotten very unfit. So I've got a book about my dieting weight journey. And anyway, long story short, I hired a personal trainer. I was 120 kilos ish at the time, maybe more. So that's, I don't know, 260 pounds, something like that. and she wanted me to do box jumps, like, from the ground up to the thing. And I said, like, I don't know. I don't really feel good about
That's a
this.
tough start. Yeah.
And she literally pokes me in the middle, like my stomach, and it's like, how much do you want to lose that? And I was like, oh, so I box jump. And then as soon as I land, like I feel like my back is just like not happy. And the next day I wake up and I literally cannot move. Like I cannot roll left, I
Oh,
cannot roll right. I'm just lying in bed crying. And it's like my intuition, my body was screaming no. And I was like, well, she's a professional. She knows what she's doing. And I was like, she doesn't know shit. Like, you know,
well, she also tapped into a core wound of like
yes.
insecurity and feeling not good in your skin or whatever was going on for you there that caused you to like push and seek
Yeah.
her help. I mean, she was in a place of authority, but also at the front that frustrates the hell out of me because like why would we motivate people with self-loathing? Can we stop with that?
Yeah. And it's just kind of like, and like, at the end of the day, I had agency. I did go through it. I did ignore my inner red flags and inner sirens and all this sort of stuff. But I think how many of us exacerbate the behavior by trying to address it in a more potent way of the way that started in the first place. So it's kind of like, or I see so many people, in their 40s or whatever, who used to be quite fit, who used to be able to do this sort of stuff, who decide today's the day and they go out and run 5 or 10 Ks when they haven't run in 5 or 10 years, and then pull a muscle or do some sort of injury and then count themselves out. And then the self-loathing and berating gets even worse. Whereas this
Mhm.
instead, it's kind of like, what is the nudge? What is the inkling? So something totally unrelated to exercise. For me personally, I've been feeling a nudge, inkling, whatever, to do meditation for kind of years. And I tried a few different methods, modalities, and I didn't like them. And I always tried with like this big, like hour long whatever. I was like, I don't meditate at all. Trying
Yeah.
to carve out an
60
hour.
seconds is, yeah.
But literally, that's what I did. So, like 2 months ago, I started with 60 seconds and then 3 minutes and then 5 minutes. And now, 2 months later, I do 20 minutes twice a day. And I feel so much better for it. And then the other day, I took my daughter into the city, and I was like, as soon as we get home, I have to make dinner. Like, where am I going to fit this in? I meditated on the train. I was like, here's my phone, play Candy Crush. I'm going to meditate. If you need me, like, shake me on the shoulder, but I don't care if people look at me because I probably think I'm just asleep. But it's just kind of like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do it right here, right now, regardless of whatever else is happening. And I just think but you have to start with that small thing because, yeah, carving out an hour in an already busy schedule. Because the thing, I'd overcommitted and overloaded myself, and I wanted spaciousness. And then it's like, well, I don't have time for an hour, and it's like, well, it's money. I had time for 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and working it up, from there. And I think with any sort of movement or any sort of practice, we're not good at the beginning because we don't do it yet.
Yeah. But also there's sort of I think what you're kind of getting at too is there's sort of like an achievement mentality underneath that. Like you didn't just want to do meditation. You wanted to do meditation well. You wanted to do it 100%.
I wanted to be
So like
zen. I wanted to sit in semi half lotus. I wanted to be uninterrupted. I wanted to be on the mountaintop. I wanted to hit the bliss field. I wanted to whatever. And I'm like, that's not life. Life is a bumpy train.
no.
Life is kids barging in with some urgent thing going, are you bleeding? No, well, you can come back in 10 minutes. So it's just kind of
So but
like,
I also think there's like this I always call it like aspirational teaching, like when we get sort of obsessed with the persona of like that's associated with the thing that we want to do rather than remembering like why we wanted to do it to begin with.
well,
And so I think
yes.
that like that's why I always try to when I first work with people really get clear on the why, because if the why is I want this persona of like a limber Pilates body person or whatever Instagram is selling these days, like that's not going to motivate. First of all, it's not going to happen overnight, but like it's also not even for everybody. Like not everyone's body is even made to do all those things. But that's not going to motivate you in the long run. So
Yes.
like why are you really here? What is it your life is lacking right now that you like think that that person has? And let's just focus on that. And then it'll be like, "Oh, well, I've always been wanted to go on this, I don't know, bike ride across Europe and I feel like I don't have the stamina." Okay, I can work with that. We can work with that. We can take pictures from the internet, and we can put them on your wall, and we can be like, this is what we're doing it for. We're doing it for this bike ride, not like some snatched waist and a pair of jeans. Like that is just so not fulfilling as a goal. So I think, and for most people, it's because they want some fulfilling aspect in your life. Like I'm guessing you wanted a sense of calm or or
Yes.
peace, whatever, but like got kind of caught up in the like, how do I do it like with an A plus?
Exactly. And I think that's the point. I love how you're tying it back to why you really want to do it in the first place, because that I wanted my brain to feel less always on, like a phone in desperate need
Mm,
of a charge in the red. And when
mhm.
I connect with that, I realize I don't need to sit on a mountaintop in a fancy outfit for an hour. I can do that in the train because at the end of that short period of time, I felt less activated and agitated by all the bodies around me and about all the things I need to do when I get home and all that sort of stuff. So, when you're talking about Pilates, how many people, as you said, look at Instagram and, they want to buy all the gear. Like, I want Lululemon and I want, and it's like, okay, really? Or do you want your be able to walk up a set of stairs without being able to puff? Or you want to be able to put your seatbelt
Tie
on
your shoes.
comfortably? Yeah, tie your shoes. So, have movement in your shoulders that worry about pain, like reach backwards. Like one time I did my shoulder and I was like, oh my God, I just wanted to be able to like reach because one of my kids was behind me and for months I could not do that
Mm.
movement. Like, what is it? Why are you doing the thing? You, for you, not the external insta pretty kind of how many likes am I going to get here with my Lululemon? Like, look at this pattern, because that's so empty and it's not going to keep you doing the thing in times where it is tough and challenging.
Also, what you described is again going back to a mindset of external validation.
Yes.
It's not connected to your internal sense of worth. It's not connected to like your what actually feeds your soul because you're like hooked on this like persona of the Lululemon wearing person as opposed to like what is my value system? And so I don't think we can get anywhere until we can define our own value system. And I think that was part of my process. I didn't even know, right? Like
Yeah. And I
a
think
lot of
that
times we
too,
don't
the
even
value
know.
system, it's like, well, I can't do this here because I might look dumb. And it's like, well, I don't care what I look like. Like, and also, are people really looking at me anyway? It's so funny. You look around a train, everyone's looking at their phone, everyone. But,
No.
I digress. It's like, what's in it for me in a healthy way, not what's in it for me in a like disregard everything else way. But, as you said, back into the internal value system and how it's helping you forward rather than the external like result or validation from others.
Because
We
people
could
are, I
talk.
mean, you're never going to get satisfaction about that, like being about that.
Not at all. You could do the same thing and in front of 10 people or tell 10 people about it and have 10 entirely different reactions. Some
Yes.
people can be like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. That's incredible. And some people are like, how selfish are you? Like the exact same action. Like, it's
I mean,
amazing.
any entrepreneur on the internet will tell you it's more like 1,000 people and you'll get 1,000 different answers. One person thinks they're great and the other 999 are like, pass.
Well, the thing is, sometimes too, it depends. Like when I work with people or even myself when I'm doing some things, and I put something out there and you do get a lot of pass or a lot of no, I remind myself I'm not an influencer. I don't need
Yeah,
thousands of people to want this
no.
thing. I only need a handful, and that's enough. And I think
We
in
only need our
today's
people.
pardon,
We just need our people. Like
our
they're
people.
out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something to remember. Like, not everybody's gonna love you, and that's okay. Do
Mhm.
you love everyone? I know I sure as shit don't. I
And that's where I think like the values thing is helpful too, because it helps you realize like, are you actually wasting your time getting wrapped up in the approval of a person who doesn't actually like align with your values anyway? So,
Yeah. Are you trying to convince somebody of something that even if you manage to change their mind or whatever, is this something that you want to move forward with? Or are you just not, as you said, aligned values? It's just not a fit.
hmm,
And I think, when we have an appreciation of that, like on my door, on my front door, it very much says, do not knock. I literally have quite a large sticker, do not knock. And if people knock now, whatever they are, Jehovah's Witnesses, people trying to sell me something, real estate, trying to appraise the house, whatever, I'm like, the sign says, do not knock. Close the door. Like, because I have to open the door because it could be a parcel. Like, Amazon Prime's my best friend. You know what I mean? It's like, I clearly have it on my door. If you're not following that, why do I need to listen to your half an hour spiel? I got things to do. Those things might be meditating and, whatever, but that's what feels aligned for me rather than listening to you trying to sell me a house I don't want anyway. So, DanaKaren, let the listeners know about your book, about whatever else you have going on, how they can find you, how they can get onto your list or whatever, all the things.
Okay, so my book is called You're Meant to Move. It's right behind me. It's on Amazon, on your local Amazon site. It's about conquering chronic pain, increasing stress resilience, and reclaiming an active life. And it's basically a DIY program for people who have been kind of frustrated trying to get moving with pain. And it goes through my journey, how I've helped clients, and sort of how I would lay out a program for people to follow so they can get moving again. I also have my website is movementremedies.org. I'm physically located now in Edinburgh, Scotland. We moved here about 6 weeks ago, so I'm in the process of setting up a studio, but I do offer online restorative Pilates mat classes that are really geared towards all abilities and catering towards pain and things. So there's lots of freebies on my site. You can check them out and get on my list and find out all the things.
I love that. Did you literally move countries?
Yeah.
I've got to have you back if you want to and talk about that. I've
Yeah,
got
that's
questions.
that's a whole nother thing about yeah. Happy
Watch this
to.
space coming back in future, moving countries. I got to know. It's piqued my curiosity, but definitely pick up a copy of DanaKaren's book, check out her website and her resources, and consider Pilates. It's so funny. Like, I don't know, you've probably heard that meme, like, Pilates. I thought they were talking about pie and lattes. No, but like movement for you that will help you to feel better. And DanaKaren is a very rich source of knowledge about this. So be sure to head her way. Thank you for joining
Thank you.
me. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.